What's up, everybody? Sodomike here. Today's video, we look at all of the weapons for New World as they were in the beta. The purpose of this video is basically to give you the prerequisite tree and all the details of each skill from the beta, kind of plan your builds. I will provide some insights, but my best advice is play to your playstyle. Do what's the most fun for you. Don't worry about some meta that's set by somebody else who doesn't play the way you do. And you know what, in my experience anyway, each weapon has its uses, although some have weaker skills built into them. So I will have some watchouts in the video, but again, you don't have to agree with me on those. So do what works for you. So just some background before we get into it, real quick. Basically, the idea here is that you can allocate 19 skill points into your tree. You start at level 1 with every weapon. You can go to 20. That only gives you 19 skill ups. You need 10 prerequisites to get the ultimates, so you have to pick an ultimate from one side or the other. But you're free to put skill points in either side at any time. You will have to have one on every horizontal line before you can go down to the next line and so on. There are also arrows that will indicate prerequisites. So it should be pretty straightforward from what you see in the video. If not, but that's totally cool. Leave a question in the comments, and I'm happy to help. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so the first weapon we're going to be looking at, we're going to start with the one-hander. So this one is sword and shield, which counts as one-hander. Nobody else can use shield, so this one just kind of counts as sword. What I'd say about sword and shield is it doesn't really matter what kind of damage you're doing with this. So I would say stay away from damage passives over tanky passives. Typically, what you're doing here is you're trying to absorb damage or save yourself some time while your offhand weapon is refreshing. So the strategy here isn't about doing a lot of damage while you're using sword and shield. It's about absorbing damage. That goes for PvE and PvP. The one thing that you have to have with the sword and shield would be, especially for expeditions, would be a weapon, your sword, socketed with a carnelian gem, which will give you increased aggro so that you can hold aggro in expeditions. So that would be about the only prerequisite. Otherwise, I would say that the sword and shield is very effective in wars to hold points. I think it's a great way to protect your team, and it's very good in open world as well, because if you have a long cooldown weapon as your offhand, like the great axe, for example, the sword and shield's nice to absorb damage while you're waiting for the great axe abilities to cool down, and then you can switch back to your great axe and do some damage to your opponent. So that's the way that I would play this weapon. Alright, on to the rapier. So while the sword scales mainly off of strength, the rapier scales mainly off of dex. You'll see this at the bottom left of your screen. It also scales off intelligence at a lower amount, but dex is the primary. So I played a lot with the rapier during the beta, and I really quite enjoyed the skill. I actually found that all three of the blood abilities, including flurry, were really good. I really recommend staying away from evade on the gray side. I think that's completely useless. The way I would play the rapier is with bleed and riposte, especially if you're a PvP player. Otherwise, flurry is really, really good. The interesting thing about rapier is that almost all of your passives are enhancing your abilities. So a lot of your skill tree is going to go into buffing the skills that you've chosen, and not so much deciding which passives to use. I would certainly recommend doing the blood ultimate. So you're going to want to put most of your skill points on the left side of the tree if you play the way that I do. This was an incredibly fun weapon to use and a great secondary for a dex build. There's just almost no better skill than riposte in PvP. It's such a good ability. It's so quick and it counters anything. Anybody who's slow really doesn't have a chance against you one-on-one, and I did see a lot of Warhammer and Great Axe players. Okay, this brings us to our last single-handed weapon, a crowd favorite, the Hatchet. Despite its many nerfs, Berserk is still absolutely ridiculously powerful. Um, Hatchet is a great secondary for a strength user or a dex user in the right instances. This weapon has basically everything. Berserk buff works for both of your weapons. It has a heal. It has Defy Death, which stops you from dying. It is incredibly fast. I'm sure it is the fastest attacking weapon, other than maybe the Rapier, although it may even have the Rapier beat, to be honest with you. This is something that is just a fury of all in the melee range. If you get in close with someone with a hatchet, they will take advantage of beating the crap out of you really, really fast. In PvP or in PvE rather, it's actually quite a lot of fun as well. It's very good against mobs. I think there's a lot of versatility built into it, other than the fact that you have to take Berserk. Like there's no not taking Berserk. That is by far the best hatchet skill, and you will definitely not regret it. And it's just really gonna be good in basically every instance. The throwing in stuff isn't as good, but it can have its uses for pulling mobs and tagging mobs and things like that. So, but yeah, I would definitely recommend the left side of the tree on this one. All right, on to Spear, our first two-handed weapon. Spear is near and dear to my heart. I played a lot of Spear in the closed beta. It scales primarily off of Dex, so it's a good option for a Dex user. There are a number of different ways you can play Spear. You can do bleeding, you can do uh, AoE stuff, you can focus on CC abilities. There's a lot of fun passives with Spear. It's just a really fun weapon. It's very balanced. I saw a lot of people using it. I don't think it's overpowered. I hope it doesn't get nerfed. But I really do think it's fun, and that's the main reason why I was playing it. And it's very, like I said, it's very versatile. You can change, you can respec this, to 10 different ways. Everything is really good. The problem is trying to figure out which of the spear moves you actually want. If you get really good at the javelin toss, I think you'll do really well for yourself. I think it's a great ability, particularly with the number one issue with open world PvP, in my opinion, which is all the people running away constantly. The javelin's a great ability, does good damage, it has a knockdown. I highly recommend getting it. But yeah, that being said, take a look at the spear passives and figure out your best way to play because there are a lot and they're pretty much all good. All right, that brings us to Great Axe. Great Axe only works with strength, so I don't recommend the Great Axe unless you're doing a strength build. Basically, the Great Axe is the strength DPS choice, so if you want to be a strength build and do a lot of damage, the Great Axe is great for that. I think that there are a couple of different ways you can play this. The Mauler side of the tree has a ton of AoE stuff. That's really good for fast clearing mobs and probably would help you power level if you're interested in doing that. The Reaper side of the tree has much more, in my opinion, uses versus player. The one downside that I will say about the Great Axe is that its cooldowns are incredibly slow. I believe it's the slowest skill weapon in the entire game, in that you're not going to be able to use your skills very often. That kind of made it a little bit boring for me because I'm constantly waiting on cooldowns. A lot of them are 30 seconds, and it's not the greatest. But I would also say that the Great Axe probably had the most interesting regular passive nodes. So basically, I found myself wanting every single one of them almost, which I couldn't say about any other weapon. So all in all, when the Great Axe's cooldowns are up, it's a lot of fun. I think it would pair really well with the Sword and Shield, for example. All right, on to the Warhammer. The Warhammer is another two-handed weapon that scales purely off of strength. Unlike the Great Axe, this one doesn't have as high of damage, so I'd say its biggest downside is probably the amount of damage you're doing. But the Warhammer has a role to play for sure. Um, it is an absolute force in PvP AoE knockdown and crowd control. Uh, you can't even dodge the big Warhammer knockdown unless you're in light armor and have a well-timed dodge roll. Medium and heavy armor people cannot dodge this, and so you can really control your enemy's movements. And if you like knocking people on their ass, this might be the weapon for you. The other thing about the Warhammer is that you can actually chain stuns. I think a really strong player could stun you with their Warhammer, get around behind you where everyone is weak, by the way, mobs and players, and go to town with you on an offhand weapon like a Hatchet, and really make up for the lack of damage of Warhammer, and then you could switch back to Warhammer and continue crowd controlling. I think this is a really interesting weapon, and it could be really good if you're going strength. Alright, let's talk about our first ranged weapon, the bow. Purely scales off dex. The bow was far and away, hands down, without a doubt, my absolute favorite weapon during the preview event in August, September of 2020. They have since nerfed the split shot, which was the #1 reason why I loved this weapon. And so I cannot recommend it anymore. I don't like the bow. I think if you're looking for a ranged weapon, the musket is far superior in my opinion. Um, the bow is okay. Some of the poisons and stuff are pretty cool. I think for the fact that this is an action combat system and how difficult it is to hit a moving target with the bow, I don't think it's that good. I think in PvE there are also better options. They also nerfed the movement buffs on the bow's passives recently, and I just really don't see a reason to play the bow at all. So if you want to try it out, obviously feel free. Let me know if you think I'm wrong in the comments, but I really don't see any builds with this weapon that make any kind of sense to me. Alright, Musket. I spent a ton of time playing Musket in the closed beta. I tried all kinds of different builds with it. I think it's really great for PvE, for questing. There are a lot of times you have to kill mobs that don't actually fight you and just run. The musket is wicked for that. It is also really good for healing yourself if you're playing a weapon like the spear, which does not have any way to heal in the skill tree at least. You can throw down a trap that will give you health back depending on how much damage you do to the trapped victim. And if you switch to your spear and throw a javelin at him, you can heal yourself for 1,000, 1,500 or something like that each throw. It's very useful. It saves you potions and food and time and all that kind of stuff. So I did like the musket. Where the musket is weak is PvP, in my opinion. It is extremely immobile. It's great only in sieges when you're on the wall or for picking people off of repeaters, in which case it is very effective. But generally speaking, open world PvP, this is probably not your weapon. I also want to take a quick opportunity to show you guys the ultimate on the left side of the tree called Sharpshooter, which gives the musket a 3x zoom. Here's what it looks like. I don't think it's worth it. I don't think you need it. I don't think you would use it very often. So if you are going musket, you can decide for yourself, but I don't think this is the way to go. Okay, on to our first of the 3 caster weapons. This is the Fire Staff. I will admit that I didn't play the Fire Staff a whole lot. I did see it in action quite a bit, particularly in wars. I think the Fire Staff puts out a lot of damage. So if you're looking for a glass cannon, this might be the one for you. Your idea here is that you're standing in the back and you're burning the crap out of people. The one plus, I would say, to the Fire Staff over everything else is that I didn't see a whole lot of people using it, which means you should be able to get gear for fairly cheap. And I think that as far as DPS goes, this might be the highest one of any class, assuming you don't get bent over immediately by somebody picking you off in combat. I did play a little bit in PvE, and I did find it very useful. The flamethrower at the very beginning of the game was amazing. So some of the other moves after that could be good as well, but like I said, I didn't play this weapon all that much. Alright, the Life Staff. So this is the only weapon that scales on focus. It's purely for healing. There are some damage moves with it, but you don't want to really use it for damage. This is the weapon that will get you into every expedition. People are always looking for healers in the Holy Trinity. It is amazing in open world PvP, especially if you're with a friend. With PvP scaling, which is in this game, um, numbers mean more than levels. And if one of you is a healer, that just increases your ability to win so much more. It combos really well with heavy armor, surprising as that it may be. I've seen a lot of people play life staff with sword and shield and other things like that. Um, you can throw down a heal that protects you and make people fight within it. There's all kinds of cool utilities that you can do with the life staff, and like I said, it's absolutely needed and essential and super important in PvE. You will never be without friends being the life staff user, so if that's your jam, I think this is the weapon for you. Alright, and now on to the last of the 11 weapons currently in New World, the Ice Gauntlet. The Ice Gauntlet is an incredibly unique weapon. It has its own feel to it for sure. You're constantly freezing and slowing things down. I think it's probably the best weapon for kiting because of your pylon. I think that if you're really talented and intelligent with your abilities, the Ice Gauntlet can be absolutely great at PvP and open world, particularly in 1v1s. You can really taunt, like, kite people around and then suck them into getting stuck into your vortex and DPS the crap out of them that way. So I definitely got my butt kicked once by an Ice Gauntlet user who was obviously way better than I am. So I thought that was pretty impressive the way they used the abilities. PvE, it's unreal. It has great damage, just like the Fire Staff. I don't really see a disadvantage here with the Ice Gauntlet. It's definitely a viable weapon for anyone who likes being a caster, and really does have a large skill scale where you can actually take this to the next level in PvP if you're that type of player. All right, so that sums up our weapon walkthrough. I know some of those were on there pretty quick, so you may have to go back and kind of pause and read them if you want. One of the craziest things about this game is that everything is fun and everything is good, and there's no obvious meta to me. I liked basically every weapon, and it's actually crazy to think that that was um, almost a disadvantage. I had such a hard time figuring out what weapons I wanted to use, and even at the last minute, changed what I'm planning on using for release. So let me know what you think the best weapon combo is and what you're planning on doing in the comments below, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the like, please hit the sub, and we'll catch you next time.